Good evening. I think it's fitting. We've heard a lot about what's going on in the United States and the progress towards communism, the globalists coming to take us over. And our final speaker of the evening, Dr. Strutz, joins us from a country that has been suffering mightily for the past 30 years under the communist boot. Dr. Strutz is a representative of the Afrikaner community. He's the executive director of the Afrikaner Foundation, a newly established group that represents the interests of the Afrikaner minorities and really all South Africans who suffer equally, in some cases, under the regime that's currently in power there. It's important to recognize that today in South Africa, the so-called Rainbow Nation, bastion of democracy, but there are far more race-based discriminatory laws in place than there ever were under the National Party. And that's something that we don't hear about, and that's a shame, because these laws directly impact the situation there, directly impact lives. And they lead to the ongoing genocide of a substantial community there that continues to shrink due to outmigration as a result of these economic challenges. South Africa has affirmative action on steroids, obscene requirements for companies, for establishing companies, for maintaining companies, for running companies. You cannot function there. It's not capitalist in any sense. Meritocracy is long gone and is long dead. And the Afrikaner people are fighting back. They're establishing universities, they're establishing communities. Some of you might have heard of Oranio, for example, as an independent community that functions without the support of the government because government services, even something as critical as electricity, are simply unreliable. And Dr. Strutz is here with a message for us from this country and from his people. And I think that it will dovetail well with the peril that we face, and perhaps we can learn some lessons from how we can persevere. Dr. Strutz.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I have to say that we are quite humbled about this opportunity. And this is, in a sense, an emotional moment for me and for us, because as the Afrikaner people in South Africa, we have pretty much been rejected by not just the international community, but by the West. North America, Western Europe, for the last few decades, we have, that's at least our perspective, we felt like we were treated like an unwelcome stepchild. Even though we regard ourselves as Westerners, we have found that many in the West don't regard us as part of the West. And also we've been treated like pariahs for several decades. But that is changing. And we were just blown away by the extent to which we have been welcomed by the New York Young Republicans Club in particular, by our friends in America. We went to the NAPCOM conference last week, and also to friends in other places in Europe. So as far as South Africa is concerned, the tide is changing. And I want to thank you for your role in this. Now, there's a famous line often attributed to Edmund Burke, so famous that people who have no idea who Edmund Burke was know only this one thing about him, this one line. We have all heard it. It goes like this: the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Now, the truth is that Edmund Burke didn't actually say this. He said something else from which this line was extrapolated, but what he actually said is much better. He said, when bad men combine, the good must associate, else they will fall, one by one, an unpitied sacrifice in a contemptible struggle. The actual statement has much more depth because it recognizes that there will always be bad men and women, but that these bad men and women become a real threat when they join forces. That there is a difference between good and evil, that some people seek to protect the good while others seek to destroy it. That we are more than individuals, that we will fall one by one if we try to face evil by ourselves, that community and association is a good, and that if we associate, we have the capacity to overcome the fiercest of obstacles. So much has happened in America in the past 2 weeks, and the speakers before me have spoken about this, so I'm not going to try to repeat that. Way too much to mention. We've all seen President Donald Trump being shot, falling to the ground, surrounded by Secret Service agents, getting up again with his fist in the air, calling on his followers to fight. And that obviously is also the theme of tonight. And that is what I want to talk to you about. What are we fighting for? It seems that in our day and age, it has become easier to explain what we are fighting against than what we are fighting for. Yet we can never truly understand what we are fighting against if we don't have clarity about what we are fighting for. When someone asks us who we are, it's not sufficient to say that we are not left or that we are not woke. I'm an Afrikaner. I come from a nation that has lived in the southernmost tip of the African continent for almost 400 years. We are Westerners because we sprout from Western civilization with its foundations in Athens, Rome, and Jerusalem. But we are also African in the sense that our culture and identity has become inextricably linked to the African continent. This is evident in the unique culture and language that we have developed, and the fact that we named our language Afrikaans and our nation the Afrikaners after the African continent. The Afrikaners of the 20th century went through considerable effort to build a strong state. That state was not sustainable for a variety of reasons. And when the state fell, it didn't merely collapse. It was taken over, and the institutions that we have built became weapons used against us. The South African government follows a strategy that they call the National Democratic Revolution, which boils down to using democracy to promote socialism. Gaining control of the levers of power under the auspice of being Democrats, only to use this to wage an ideological war on targeted communities. Those in power in South Africa are bold enough to describe their own ideology as a blend of race nationalism and socialism, as if that has not been tried. Yet they have successfully convinced much of the world that they only seek peace and prosperity. Either that, or those who support them don't really care about race nationalism and don't really care about state oppression, as long as it is their preferred race that is targeted and is their state doing the oppression. Faced with more than 140 race laws in South Africa today, and a collapse of every single government function, except tax collection, of course, the Afrikaner people have rediscovered an ancient truth. This is that the only sustainable road to freedom is through well-functioning community institutions, built on a strong sense of communal identity. We have lost this, but our experience has led us to rediscover these things. America, I might say, it seems, has lost much of this as well. While this has been part of the fabric that has led America to the greatness in its past. If there was only one thing that Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton agreed on, it might have been this. It is especially evident in the observations made by Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America. And this is where the Afrikaner Foundation comes in. The Solidarity Movement in South Africa is a network of more than 50 institutions aimed at ensuring a future for the Afrikaner people. This includes Solidarity, AfriForum, the Solidarity Helping Hand, the Federation of Afrikaans Cultural Organizations, Academia, Soltech, Barula Media, the Orania Development Company, and many others. We are very proud to say that everything we have achieved over the last few decades was through our own work and funding from within our own community. For example, we were able to build a technical college worth $11 million and finish it under budget and before the deadline. And to build this college, the single biggest donation that we have received was 50 American cents. How did we do this? We crowdfunded hundreds of thousands of people to donate the equivalent of 50 cents every month for several years. However, due to the accelerated deterioration of South Africa, we have to accelerate our own work. And so the Afrikaner Foundation was founded to increase international cooperation for the Afrikaner people and to enable our friends abroad who are interested to support these initiatives, either through institutional cooperation, donations, or, and this is what I would like to encourage you to do, becoming an international member of the Afrikaner Foundation by making a small monthly contribution. Now, as a result of purchasing power parity, the price of 2 cappuccinos in New York is more or less the equivalent of a high-quality steak meal in South Africa, which is yet another reason why you should visit South Africa. So what you might regard as a small contribution would be accepted by us as a big contribution. And so this brings me to America and to the West. There are many things that we as Afrikaners and our friends in New York have in common. We each man a particular outpost on the civilizational battlefront. As Westerners, we draw our conception of freedom and what it means to be free back to Aristotle, who spoke about the movement from potentiality to actuality. That freedom is not something to be demanded as a right, but to be fulfilled within the context of our communities. To Cicero, who spoke about the reciprocal nature of republicanism, that freedom implies receiving certain things as a result of the sacrifices of our ancestors and sacrificing certain things for the sake of our children. And to St. Paul, who called on us to live in the fruits of the Spirit and not in the fruits of the flesh. That freedom implies living virtuously and courageously in the face of animosity. The primary struggle of our day and age is not merely a clash between different civilizations, but in many ways a clash between those who wish to preserve civilization and those who seek to destroy the very concept of civilization, but Western civilization in particular as a primary target. Thus, if we are not prepared to fight for the preservation of civilization, we have to accept barbarism. As Westerners, we believe in transcendence. We believe that we have been called to fulfill a certain duty at a certain time and in a certain place. There is a reason why Gavin Wax was not born in 1760 and why he wasn't one of the founding fathers. It's because we need him to fulfill a certain duty in this place, one that George Washington wasn't called on. And there's a reason why Jack the Soviet wasn't born in 1930 and why he didn't serve as Secretary of the State during the Cold War. It's because we need him to fulfill a certain responsibility at this time and this place. And the same goes for each and every one of us. This is why we have a slogan in Afrikaans that says, "Soet is die stryd," or "Sweet is the fight." The fight is sweet, not because we fight like Achilles for our own glory, but because we fight like Hector, to protect what is rightfully ours, to honor those who came before us, and to leave greatness behind for those who will come after us. And the beautiful part is that we have each been blessed with a unique skill set, which means that each of us has a unique place in this fight. Therefore, we cannot afford to be spectators. Nothing is easier than to stand on the stadium criticizing those who are out in the field, who are out there doing things in the real world, achieving things and making mistakes in the process. Our legacy will not be determined by the extent to which we can point out the mistakes of others, nor how few mistakes we make, because the one who wins is rarely the one who makes the fewest mistakes. We need to be out in the field, and we need to be wise and prudent, but yet not allow the fear of making a mistake to hold us back when we are called on. And when we make mistakes, we correct them. But we must not apologize, because as my colleague Ernst van Zyl, who is here tonight, has remarked, there is no point in apologizing to someone who does not believe in mercy or forgiveness, and who will only use the apology as an admission of guilt and a justification for punishment. This is why we have another saying, die een wat sy deelname weier is die een wat sy nasie vermoor. It might be translated loosely as, the one who refuses his participation is the one who partakes in diffusing his nation. We need to recognize that we are not simply fighting for an idea. We are often told that the American dream is an idea, when in fact it is much more than that. People are not willing to die for ideas. People die for the actual manifestation of ideas. We will not die for the idea of love, but we will die for the people we love. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans didn't die for the idea of Spartan freedom, but for the actual thing. They knowingly and willingly fought to the death, not for an idea, but for their wives and children, their nation and their community, for the actual manifestation of Spartan freedom. They achieved greatness because they knew exactly what and whom they were fighting for. They fought and died for freedom and for love because they knew the sweet taste of freedom and the captivating feeling of love. South Africa is an outpost on the civilizational battlefront, and so is New York. We need to recognize that bad men and women have already joined forces all over the world, and that they are not interested in discussion or debate. They are acting as a united international front. When they started tearing down statues in South Africa, it was just a matter of time before they started tearing down statues in America. And when they invented critical race theory in America, it was just a matter of time before it was exported to South Africa. And so, if we, the good, don't associate, we will fall one by one. So let us raise the glass tonight to sacrifices already made, to victories already claimed, to honor already acquired, beauty already preserved, and love already discovered. And to a solemn oath to those great people who were here before us, and to our children's children whose achievements will, if God permits, outshadow our own, that we will not stop fighting. There are dark times ahead for South Africa, America, and the West. Perhaps we too shall face a time when we feel overwhelmed and close to despair. But in those moments, we will remember why we fight. To protect what we love and to honor the legacy of those who came before us, who were indeed great. We will stand our ground even against insurmountable odds. We will remain steadfast and unyielding because our resolve is fortified by the pursuit of goodness, the preservation of beauty, and the knowledge that we live honorably, true to our tradition, and inspired by our calling to ensure that the brilliant light of Western civilization will not flicker or dim as long as we live. Thank you very much.
Fantastic speech, Dr. Wells, fantastic. And there is more to come.